Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Rundown. I am your host today, Craig DeLuz, and we are coming at you from Las Vegas, Nevada at SHOT Show 2022 from the Beretta Media Center? Media Zone. I'm always messing that stuff up. Anyway, that's why I have this guy here, because as we all know, not only do I not do it by myself, I probably couldn't do it by myself.
My name is Mike Piwowarski. I am the co-host for today's program here on The Rundown, where we promise to bring you 2A views and conservative news. And Craig, I don't know what day it is.
It's like that sometimes here at SHOT, man. It's, we apologize for coming on late, but what winds up happening is, we're doing these interviews and we're talking with folks and everything, and it's just, you'd be surprised how things catch up to you.
Very, very quickly. I know, I think sometime yesterday we had Taco Tuesday.
Yeah.
But we've been doing a lot of work. A lot of video, a lot of audio, a lot of stuff, and so I'm not sure what today is.
Oh, I can tell you what today is. You know what day it is?
What day is it?
Uh-oh. Mike. What day is it, Mike? Uh-oh. Mike. What day is it, Mike?
It's hump day.
Hump day?
That's right, folks. It is Hump Day.
Hump Day.
Hump Day. Except it's still relatively early in the week for SHOT, though.
Oh, it is. Listen, the Hump Day weekend started at SHOT Show on Monday afternoon.
Yeah. So we're just really kind of, this is the day where you hit your stride. You either determine it's either just going to be a cluster for the rest of the week, or it's going to finish strong.
Yep. Am I going to get the proper amount of rest, hydration, and sleep, or am I going to keep going to SHOT Show? That's the decision you have to make. Yeah.
Right. No one can make that decision for you. It's definitely a decision that you as a grown folk have to make for yourself.
With no influence or pressure from others.
None whatsoever.
None.
Well, yeah. Good luck with that one. All right, well, hey, there's actually tons of very interesting things in the news these days. And why don't we go ahead and get right to it. Let's start off with our first story, and it has to do with U-Haul. Now, we all know that there is a massive exodus from California to many other places in the country. I think the primary places people are going when they leave California are Nevada, Arizona, and Texas. But an interesting thing has happened with U-Haul, Mike, and that is that they ran out of trucks in California. There are no U-Haul trucks in California because everyone keeps driving them to other states.
Listen, if you wanted to take a U-Haul truck right now and drive it from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, the cost of doing so is something like $1,800 one way. However, if you want to go from Las Vegas to Los Angeles with the U-Haul truck, the cost right now is $3. I'm not kidding. That's true. They're so short on trucks that if you'll drive one anywhere to California, U-Haul will do it for basically free. So if you're looking for a cheap way to get to California, go to U-Haul and they'll give you a truck to go.
Well, the reason why they call it free, Mike, is because you're actually doing their job for them, helping to get the truck back.
Very much so.
Otherwise, they have to pay somebody to drive that truck back to California.
Oh, you're right. You're very much right, yeah. Yeah, but literally ran out of trucks? No lie. Yep.
Well, and it just, once again, it just speaks to, and I've always said that everybody has their ouch point, right? Like, people talk about, you love where you live, right? I love where I live. But at a certain point, the negatives so far outweigh the positives that you just decide it's time to go. I've hit my ouch point, fine. As much as I love California, I'm going to leave. And that's not, by the way, just conservatives who feel that way. It's people who can't afford to own a home, who can't get a decent paying job. It's a whole bunch of people.
Who hate mudslides, who hate fires, who hate earthquakes.
But love hurricanes.
Tsunamis. Well, again, I get a message alert about a week ahead of time that the hurricane's coming. You know what I can do? Not stay there. I have that opportunity to do so. Unlike when the mudslide, tornado, fire, hurricane shows up in the middle of the night.
Well, I just decide I'm not going to hang out near where there are mudslides. How about that?
Don't you live in California?
Yeah, there's not mudslides all over California.
I've seen California. It's not pretty. It's like a mudslide hit it. And then
California is a very beautiful place.
Tidal wave pushed it up.
Do not listen to this hater. Do not listen to this hater. See, this is the guy. This is how they created. This is how they came up with the concept of Florida Man. It's either a really, really cool story, or you're like, what the Mike is going on?
It's true. This story so far does not have glitter bombs in it yet. So.
no glitter bombs in this particular story.
Yep.
Okay, moving right along in the stories that we're talking about today. The next one has to do with school closures. Now, the reason why this story, by the way, is interesting, because we all know, anybody who paid any attention knows that, well, the school closures, distance learning was a hot mess, right? And even those with the best of intentions were not able to fully be able to educate all students the way in which they would have been able to have been educated had students been in the classroom. Anybody who's paying attention to any of the data knows schools were not a vector for infection for those schools that stayed open or those schools that closed and then reopened. And even still to this day, there is a grand total of 44, I think there's a grand total of, I think it's something like 400 or 800 children since the beginning of COVID have died of COVID, or died with COVID, right? We don't know how many of them actually died of COVID. They believe that number is somewhere closer to a couple of dozen. But for the most part, it's not a disease that hurts kids. In fact, they found the kids were safer at school than they were in any other public place. And yet and still, you still have folks on the left who are claiming that, well, schools should have been closed and schools still should be closed. Well, this is a guy who wrote an article in the New York Intelligencer. He is a left-wing liberal, and there's a lot of things that are in this thing that are still kind of really whacked out, that are not really that we would disagree with. But at least he points out that school closures were a mess, and he's like, it's time for us on the left to actually finally admit that it was a huge mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, like you said, we've known this for a year. We continue to see the studies that said the children under the age of 10 were the least vulnerable, and the place to keep them was, listen, we're not locking them up or anything, but we're going to allow them to continue to go to school and associate with other 18-year-olds where they continue to build those individual immunities amongst themselves. You want to know what a herd immunity looks like? Look at a group of under 18-year-olds, okay? They've been together all day long. As long as they've been in school together, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get somebody that's very resilient when it comes to this virus.
Well, and unfortunately, too often they don't want to admit that, and that's what really makes this frustrating, is getting the left to admit that there's science, right? And what they don't, so here's what let me clarify. Here's what they don't want to admit. They don't want to admit that it was actually teachers' unions that were forcing schools closed, that they were exerting political pressure on left-wing politicians who they support in order to close down schools. Because if you looked, and this is what he notes in his article, he's like, the places that closed and stayed closed were largely places that were run by Democrats with very strong unions, where the board was actually elected by the union, and they basically exerted their political power in order to keep those schools closed. And it was completely and utterly wrong, and it's hurt our children. And as a liberal, he's pointing out it hurts the kids the kids that were hurt the most were the kids that could afford least to be hurt by the closure of schools.
Yeah, let's see what this has done socially for these kids, for their skills.
Right.
You know, they're being isolated for 2 years and having to live in a fear of this COVID would decay. Let's say that, right?
Well, but you know, Mike, they've actually estimated that some kids have lost up to 2.5 years of learning. That's how far behind,
sure,
or how far of content where they should be that they've actually wound up losing. It is, and I can tell you as a school board member, and we did our best to try and make sure we provided a quality education. But you know what? You can only do so much. As I have often said, it's very, very difficult to make chicken salad out of chicken shit, no matter how much mayonnaise you have.
I mean, I've tasted worse, but I'll go with you on that.
All right, we're moving at a pretty breakneck pace here talking about stuff. This one I think is going to take a little bit.
You hope.
I hope. Carhartt, who by the way is here at SHOT.
I don't think they are.
You don't think they are?
No, I haven't seen any protests.
Oh,
I
interesting.
haven't seen any protests. I think if they were still here, they may have been here, but I don't think they're here anymore.
Well, okay, so Carhartt is basically, the president's mandate on employers, which required larger employers to require their employees to get vaccines or fire them. That got shot down by the Supreme Court. But there are some companies that have decided they're going to enforce the vaccine mandate anyway, and one of those is Carhartt. And the interesting thing is, Mike, Carhartt tends to be worn, and maybe it's just because of the circles that we run in, tends to be worn by more freedom-thinking, freedom-loving, conservative, gun/blue-collar folks. And I think this is gonna put a little sticky in their wiki.
Yeah, this is outdoor worksman's clothes. This is hunter clothes. This is lumberjack clothes. This is everything that you expect of the right when we're doing our work or our leisure activities. And for Carhartt to now come out and say opposed to the Supreme Court's decision, meaning they're going to be bringing the vaccine mandate about by themselves without the Supreme Court's the Supreme Court took the power away from the president, said that your Supreme Court order is unjust. And this is like we talked about, Craig, that many companies were hiding behind the president's order because they want the vaccine mandates, but were afraid to order it. Now that the Supreme Court has said, no, we will not make this enforced, we're going to put an injunction against it. There are still some individual companies out there that are going to make it mandatory. Because remember, the president's decision, his executive order, the Supreme Court found was only good for federal employees or people in federal buildings. So all of you everyday mom and pop companies or middle ground companies with over 100 doesn't apply to you unless your company says it does. And guess what Carhartt just did?
Well, and that's exactly what happened. And the reality is a lot of these folks out there, a lot of these corporations are not liberty-minded. And the worst thing that we can do, here's one thing. I'm not a person who, it's hard to boycott every company that doesn't toe the line when it comes to liberty. It'd be very hard to do anything, to eat anything, to make any phone calls. But when you have a company that markets themselves as American and as on our side and freedom loving and all of that, like Carhartt tries to do, they're the ones that in particular need to be held accountable. So, I think that it's important that we recognize that, they don't believe in liberty, or they have their own brand of liberty. No, they believe in liberty, but.
Yeah, you got liberty, but exactly right.
They're liberty butts, as Mike likes to say when we talk about Second Amendment butts.
Yep.
I believe in the Second Amendment, but.
Yeah.
We will take away your rights when it's advantageous to us.
Guess what? They will.
Yes, they will. They most definitely will. All right, this last story. I don't know as much as this is a story or that this is just a thing that I read that really kind of pissed me off. All right. Now it's a story that was in the Washington Post, right? And it was literally a story created by them, and you can tell just from the headline. It was, "Why aren't Americans more alarmed by white supremacist violence?" Now, Mike, before we get into what the study does, why do you think Americans are not alarmed by white supremacist violence?
Because I think most of them realize that white supremacy violence is another one of those terms made up by the left to try and stir the last base of voters that the Democrats are holding on to in the minority parties. That they want them to think it's a real thing. So they need it's real. The whites are going to hurt you. You have to come to us for protection and give us your votes, because without your votes, we can't do anything to save the children.
See, first of all, there's the redefinition of white supremacy. And white supremacy is, quite frankly, in their eyes, any imbalance or anything that is, if anything doesn't seem fair, and by fair they mean if the outcomes don't specifically align with what the percentage is in society or what they believe it should be, then it's white supremacy. If it's white supremacy, if it's an act of violence that involves a white person or a person who you can claim to be white, because, for example, two great examples of white supremacist violence. You've got whether it was George Zimmerman, who's Cuban, who's Latino, who's Latin, inflicting violence defending himself, but a violent act against a black teenager, or it's a white guy like Kyle Rittenhouse inflicting violence upon 3 white guys who were attacking him, one of which is a child rapist. Those are acts of white supremacy in their eyes. And these are acts of white supremacy violence that we ought to be concerned with, right?
Well, like I said to you earlier, there could be only one, right? And if you're going to have a white supremacist out there, he's got to start getting rid of other people if he wants to be number one. But this is ridiculous. Again, that the white supremacists, these so-called alleged white supremacists that are out there going after innocent people for no reason other than to claim the title. I don't know I don't get the point of this guy's article.
Well, the thing was, so here's what they wound up doing. What they did was they did a study, right? Where they got like 1,500 people. They asked them various questions, and they shared with them scenarios, right? Like, okay, a white guy attacked a black guy, and because he doesn't like black people. I don't know, whatever it was. But they made it so whether or not it was specifically white supremacy.
Right.
But what I believe they did was they just said, well, if it was a white guy attacking anybody else, it was white supremacy.
It must be white supremacy.
If
Even
it
if
was
it's
a black
white
guy attacking a white guy, it had nothing. Race had nothing to do with it.
But a white guy and a white guy was still white supremacy. Yeah.
So first of all, they created and fabricated scenarios that aren't happening. Right. I mean, first of all they just created scenarios, and then were determined. Well, asked them how concerned they were about it.
Right.
Well, the problem with that modality is first of all, anybody who actually pays attention knows that white supremacist violence is not a thing. It's not. Well, I'm going to say it's not a thing. It's not a common thing. Right. It's not literally. And by the way, anytime a white conservative does anything remotely violent, it is automatically white supremacy. The only really most known act of white supremacist violence that I can think of in recent history was the guy in Charlottesville who ran his car into a bunch of protesters.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what his evil was in his heart, but that definitely had the opportunity to be such. Yeah.
Right. But other than that, I'm like, no. They try to say that January 6th was white supremacist, but I know Native Americans, I know Latinos, I know black people, I know Asians who were there, I know gay people who were there.
Yeah.
So if that was white supremacy, they really suck at being white supremacists. I'm just saying. They're not very good white supremacists.
I think you got it. I think you nailed it.
Right. I don't get it, right? Some of the organizations that they name, by the way, are white supremacists, and I'm like, yeah, I'm a member of at least one or two of those, and I've never seen white supremacy on the agenda.
Yeah, right.
I've never seen it. So I don't know what it is that you're talking about. But then they go on in the article, and then one of the reasons, the things they used as an excuse, they said, well, you don't, the reason why they're not really concerned about Antifa is because you really don't see Antifa violence. There's not really a lot of it, and they are not really hurting anyone. Now, maybe I was wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. But most of the riots that were taking place during 2020, the George Floyd, BLM, Antifa riots, weren't those mostly Antifa riots?
Yes, mostly Antifa. In fact, just talked to earlier today a gentleman that was at the riots in Portland and observed everything going on. But that was the one, if you recall, after the George Floyd incident, where they said that it was mostly peaceful. Well, guess what mostly peaceful means? Partly chaos, partly riots, buildings partly burning down. And I talked to somebody who was there, and he said the only reason it was 75%, actually it was 25%, not 100%, because Antifa didn't have enough people.
Well, but think about this now. There were about 8,700, quote unquote, and I don't know how inflated this is, protests, right, for during George Floyd. Total, right? That was the total of them. Of those, right, and that's of those, 574, 575 were considered to be riots. Now, we don't know that looting didn't occur at the other at the other, 8,000, 200 some odd. We don't know that rooting or violence, we don't know that it didn't occur. Just there wasn't enough for it to be considered a riot. So yes, the overwhelming majority of those protests were peaceful. But here's the thing they don't point out. Of those 574 protests, 95% started from one of those 8,700 Black Lives Matter protests, right? Meaning during the day there was Rainbow Coalition, be good to black people protests, but at night it turned into burn baby burn,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
By the way, those were largely led by Antifa. I will at least say that the BLM leaders, a lot of them were not part of that, or at least not visibly part of that.
Right,
Most of them were woke white college students wearing their black with their masks on, throwing rocks. And by the way, the first couple of weeks, 2,000 officers were injured.
That's right.
In total, 25 people lost their lives. When I say lost their lives, I don't mean there was a protest and they had a heart attack. I mean, they were beaten, they were attacked, they were shot and killed by Antifa BLM protesters, including an off-duty police officer.
That's right. It's
or a retired police officer.
Yep. Doing duty there outside the mall.
Right. And by the way, most of them were people of color. So for them to say that absolutely nobody got injured or hurt by Antifa, I'm like, the Washington Post needs to shut the heck up.
Yeah, they really do. And I'm surprised you still have them on your computer. I thought they would have canceled you by now.
Right. Well, dude, I'm constantly, I have to always hear what the other side is saying.
Gotcha.
You got to know what they're saying. How do you refute lies if you do not know what the lies are, or you do not know when they're lying? Now, with them, you can tell they're lying because, there's print on their website.
Yeah, there you go. They have spoken.
Kind of like, how do you know a politician is lying? His lips are moving.
Yep. They have spoken.
They have spoken. But anyway, that's just beyond frustrating. And, first of all, let's stop taking every act of violence and calling it white supremacy. How about that? Number one. How about sometimes there are just some mean, evil people who do evil things, right? How about that?
Betty White.
Right. But I'm like, imagine if we did that for everything. So imagine if every single time a black person committed an act of violence, we called it an act of black supremacy.
Right. You're fine.
Even when they attack black people.
Yeah.
And by the way, just so you folks know, when it comes to violence and murder, most people, and we always talk about black on black crime, right?
Yeah.
Everyone points to, and I do it as well, that most black victims of gun violence are shot and killed by black people, right? But that's the same for whites. That's the same for Latinos. It's the same for Asians. We seem to like killing our own, right?
Yeah.
It's just people. Well, of course, part of it also has to do with people are more likely to kill someone they are familiar with.
Right. True.
And we are more likely to spend time with people who are like us.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
But having said that, to act like, well, every time a black person commits an act of violence against someone of another race, it's not racism. But every time a white person does, that's just nonsensical.
It is. It really is. And the more you think about it, the more you dwell on it, it's just it angers you. It angers you to think about it.
It does. It angers me. It angers me highly, but clearly not as much as tofu angers the people in Texas. A friend of mine who actually moved from California to Texas decided to post this. And the thing that they're pointing out here is that if you notice, to the right and to the left, the shelves are completely and utterly empty. But the tofu section and the soy meat section in the supermarket, Texans have not touched it. They're like, even when their shelves are totally barren, they're not eating the fake meat. And Mike, that just leads me to something that I was wondering. Like now, Kentucky Fried Chicken now has this no meat, like not chicken. I'm like, it's not. If it's not chicken, then guess what? It's not chicken.
No, I agree with you, but we got the meatless meat and the chickenless chicken, and just go in there and get your pile of ground up grass trimmings from
Mike, if it's meatless, it's not meat.
I know, I agree with you.
Don't get me wrong. If that's what you want to eat,
If that's
then
your
you
thing,
eat that.
that's
If
fine.
that's you, you do you, boo boo. But
The good news
it ain't
is
me.
you'll never have a chlorophyll deficiency. That's for sure.
I will. Okay, you need to repeat that.
Oh, I'm sorry. You'll never have a chlorophyll deficiency. That's for sure.
I'm just the wussification of America is what this is all about. That's really what it's all about. They all want us to turn into people who are in touch with our feminine side, woke social justice warriors.
Yeah, that's why the U-Haul trucks have left California.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
They can do that all they want over there in the lands of fruits and nuts.
You know what? I just came up with a business idea though. Perhaps you can use those U-Haul trucks in Texas to drive all the tofu and fake meat products to California and sell them to Californians.
Yeah, that's true.
U-Haul pay you to do it.
That's true. Yeah, you could be a sausage transporter. Yeah.
It's not sausage.
Soy sausage.
Soy sausage.
Which actually sounds like a Spanish sausage introducing itself, by the way.
Hi, I'm sausage.
Soy
sausage.
Soy sausage. Yeah.
Or it sounds like a sausage with soy sauce.
Yeah, there you go. Could be. Yeah.
All right, Mike. Hey, how about a shout out to our sponsors?
Hey, our good friends over at Guerrilla Machining, Grid Defense, California Republican Assembly. Thank you again for all of your support. Please support them the way they've supported us. Support you.
Exactly. So, folks, we are having a good time here at SHOT Show 2022. Good times are happening. I hope you guys are enjoying the interviews that we're sharing. If you're watching us on some of the other stations, we're only really posting the interviews on the gun-related stations. Some of you, I know you like politics, but you may not be interested in hearing about gun gadgets. If you do, then go to 2A News, go to Arms Room Radio, go to the Rundown and the Rundown page, and you'll find it there, and you'll be able to see the interviews that we're doing with folks who we're meeting and running into here at the show. But thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for liking and sharing. Thank you for subscribing and encouraging your friends to do the same. We're going to be back with more interviews today, as well as we'll be doing the show again tomorrow. Hopefully on time, but at least we know it will get done.
Hey, we'll be here waiting for you.
You guys take care.